The slaps came out of nowhere. First, my mother's hand hit my left cheek, hard enough to make my eyes sting. Then my father's hand on the other side, sending me stumbling into the dining table. The wedding magazines I'd been flipping through fell to the floor, pages of smiling brides and white dresses scattering everywhere. For a moment, I just stood there, too shocked to speak. But when I finally looked up, I saw no regret in their eyes, only cold determination. And that's when I realized this wasn't just anger. It was control. My ears rang. My face burned. But it was my mother's next words that truly shattered something inside me. Groom yourself properly. You're meeting Mr. Kapoor next week. He's 72, owns half the textile mills in the city, and he's willing to overlook your average looks if you learn how to present yourself. I touched my stinging cheek, unable to process what I was hearing. Mr. Kapoor. The man I'd seen at my father's business dinners, the one who stared at me while talking to my parents. The one whose wife had died 6 months ago, leaving him wealthy and alone. My father lit a cigarette, not looking at me. His hands were steady, unbothered by what he'd just done. We've already agreed on the terms. The wedding is in 2 months. You'll do as you're told. I was 23 years old. I had a degree in computer science. I had a job offer from a tech company in Bangalore that I was supposed to start next month. I had a whole life planned out that had nothing to do with marrying a man old enough to be my grandfather. I won't do it. My mother's laugh was cold. You will, unless you want to see what happens to your brother's medical treatment when we stop paying for it. My blood froze. Arjun, my younger brother, who'd been diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. My brother, whose treatment cost more than I could ever afford on my own. My brother, who was currently in remission but needed ongoing care. They had me and they knew it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my face still throbbing from their slaps. The walls of my childhood bedroom felt like a prison. Every poster, every book, every piece of my past now seemed like evidence of a naivety I couldn't afford anymore. Before we dive deeper, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, what would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you sold your future for their own greed? My parents had sold me. That's what this was. They'd sold me to a rich old man to clear their debts and fund their lifestyle. And they'd made sure I couldn't refuse by holding my brother's life hostage. But as I lay there in the darkness, something cold and calculating began to form in my mind. If they wanted to play with lives like they were commodities, then I'd learn the game. I'd learn it better than them. And I'd make them regret ever thinking I was powerless.
I just needed to be smart about it.
The next morning, I woke up early and began my transformation. Not the one my parents wanted, the one I needed. I started by doing something I'd never done before. I hacked into my father's email account. It wasn't difficult. He used the same password for everything, my mother's birth date. The man who thought he was clever enough to orchestrate my future couldn't even create a secure password. Within minutes, I was reading through years of his correspondence. What I found made my stomach turn. My father's business wasn't struggling like he'd always claimed. It was thriving. The textile factory was making record profits. The real estate investments were paying off. We weren't drowning in debt. We were swimming in money. But there were other emails. Messages to my mother's brother about needing to move assets and hide income before an audit. Discussions about offshore accounts. Receipts for luxury purchases made in cash. My parents weren't poor. They were tax evaders.
And then I found the emails about me.
Mr. Kapoor had offered them 5 crore rupees for the marriage. 5 crores. Plus a partnership in his textile business that would make my father rich beyond his current means. I wasn't just being sold. I was being auctioned to the highest bidder. But the worst part, the part that made me want to scream, was an email my mother had sent to her sister 3 months ago. Mira is getting older and harder to control. If we don't marry her off soon, she'll start asking questions about the money. Better to get her settled with someone who'll keep her busy and grateful. Kapoor is perfect, old enough that he won't live long, but rich enough that even if Mira inherits something, it won't matter to us. We'll have already secured our share. They'd been planning this for months. Not because they needed money, because they wanted more of it, and I was the price they were willing to pay. I closed the laptop and looked at myself in the mirror. My cheek was still slightly swollen from yesterday's slaps. My eyes were red from lack of sleep. But behind the tears and the pain, something else was growing.
Rage.
Pure, focused rage. If they wanted me groomed for Mr. Kapoor, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. But not in the way they expected. I spent the next week transforming myself. I went to the salon and got my hair styled. I bought expensive makeup and learned how to apply it perfectly through YouTube tutorials. I practiced walking in heels until my feet bled. I studied how to smile just right, how to lower my eyes demurely, how to play the role of the obedient daughter. My parents were thrilled. My mother actually hugged me, told me I was finally showing some sense. My father nodded approvingly and handed me his credit card to buy new clothes. They thought they'd broken me. They thought the slaps and threats had worked. They had no idea what I was actually doing. While I played the part of the compliant bride-to-be during the day, I spent my nights digging deeper into my parents' secrets. I copied every file from my father's computer. I photographed documents from his home office. I recorded conversations using my phone hidden in my dupatta. What I discovered was bigger than just tax evasion. My father had been involved in illegal land acquisitions. He'd bribed government officials. He'd forged documents. There were shell companies and fake contracts and money laundering schemes that went back years. If this information got into the wrong hands, my parents wouldn't just lose their money. They'd go to prison. But I wasn't ready to use that weapon yet. Because I had a bigger plan forming, one that required patience and perfect timing. The meeting with Mr. Kapoor happened on a Saturday evening at our house. He arrived with his lawyer and accountant, as if this were a business transaction instead of a marriage proposal, which I supposed it was. I played my part perfectly. I wore a traditional blue salwar kameez. I kept my eyes downcast. I served tea with steady hands. I smiled when appropriate and stayed silent when not spoken to. Mr. Kapoor watched me like I was a car he was considering purchasing. His eyes lingered on my figure, my face, my hands. It made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure. "She's well-mannered," he finally said to my father, as if I wasn't in the room. "That's good. My first wife was too opinionated. It caused problems." My father laughed. "Mira knows her place. She'll be an obedient wife. And she can have children? I want sons." My mother answered before I could. "She's young and healthy. No problems there." They were discussing my fertility like I was livestock. Every word made me more determined to destroy them all. After an hour, Mr. Kapoor stood up. "I'm satisfied. We'll proceed with the marriage. My lawyer will send the papers tomorrow." After he left, my parents celebrated with expensive whiskey. They toasted to their success, to their business deal, to securing their future. Neither of them noticed me slip away to my room, where I immediately began the next phase of my plan. I called Arjun at his hostel. He was 19 now, studying engineering, unaware of what our parents had arranged for me. We were close, but I'd been careful not to tell him anything yet. I needed him safe from the fallout of what was coming. But now I needed his help. I told him everything. The forced marriage, the money, the secrets I'd uncovered. I expected him to be shocked, angry, protective. Instead, after a long silence, he said something that surprised me. I knew. My heart stopped. What? I knew they were planning something. Mom and Dad visited me last month. They told me that if I wanted to keep getting treatment, I needed to convince you to go through with the marriage. They said you were being selfish. And? What did you say? I told them to go to hell. His voice was steady, certain. Didi, I'm in remission. The treatment is maintenance now. If it comes down to my health or your freedom, choose your freedom. I'll figure out the rest. Tears burned my eyes. My baby brother, the one they'd used to blackmail me, was telling me to save myself. No, I said firmly. We're both getting out of this. I have a plan, but I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. What I needed from Arjun was simple: access to his medical records and bills. Everything our parents had paid for, every treatment, every expense. He sent me digital copies that night. As I reviewed them, I found exactly what I'd suspected. My parents had been inflating the costs. They'd been telling me our June's treatment cost 5 lakhs a month, when the actual bills were barely 2 lakhs. They'd been pocketing the difference, using my guilt and fear to control me. The lies went deeper than I'd imagined, and my revenge would have to be equally thorough. The wedding preparations moved forward like a runaway train. My mother took me shopping for jewelry. My father finalized the venue. Invitations were sent. Everything was proceeding according to their plan. Except I'd made some preparations of my own. 3 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from Mr. Kapoor's lawyer. He wanted to meet with me privately to discuss the prenuptial agreement. My parents, surprisingly, encouraged this. They thought it meant I was cooperating. I met the lawyer at a cafe in South Delhi. He was a thin man in his 50s with expensive glasses and a cold demeanor. He slid the papers across the table. Mr. Kapoor wants to ensure everything is clear. You'll have no claim to his business assets. In the event of his death, you'll receive a monthly allowance but no lump sum inheritance. Any children will be his heirs, but their inheritance will be held in trust until they turn 30. I read through the document carefully. It was designed to ensure I remained dependent and controllable. Even if Mr. Kapoor died, I'd never have real financial freedom. I have some concerns, I said quietly. The lawyer looked surprised. This is standard. Not negotiable. I understand. But I'd like to propose an addition. I pulled out a document I'd prepared. If the marriage ends for any reason within the first year, I want 50 lakh rupees as compensation. Call it security. He laughed. Mr. Kapoor will never agree to that. Then perhaps Mr. Kapoor should know that I'm aware of certain financial irregularities in his business dealings. Specifically, the 4 shell companies he uses to hide income. The fake charity he operates to claim tax deductions. The bribes paid to municipal officers. The lawyer's face went pale. How did you? I'm smarter than I look. And I have evidence. So either Mr. Kapoor adds this clause or I send everything I have to the Income Tax Department and the Anti-Corruption Bureau. I'd been investigating Mr. Kapoor too. If I was going to be forced into this, I'd at least arm myself with weapons. The lawyer took my document. I'll discuss this with my client. 2 days later, the clause was added. My parents never knew about it. They didn't bother to read the prenup carefully. They just cared that the wedding was still happening. But I now had insurance. If everything went according to plan, I'd never need to marry Mr. Kapoor at all. 1 week before the wedding, I made my first move. I created a fake email account and sent an anonymous tip to the Income Tax Department. The email contained selected files from my father's computer, enough to raise flags, but not enough to reveal all his crimes. Just enough to make them start looking. 3 days later, tax officials showed up at my father's factory. They asked questions. They demanded records. They left with boxes of documents. My father came home in a panic. He locked himself in his office, making frantic phone calls. I heard him shouting at his accountant, blaming everyone but himself. My mother was terrified. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. What if they find something? She whispered to my father when she thought I couldn't hear. They won't. Everything is buried too deep. But it wasn't. I'd made sure of that. The wedding was now 4 days away. Guests had confirmed their attendance. The venue was decorated. My wedding dress hung in my closet like a prison uniform. I spent those days in a strange state of calm. Everything was falling into place. I just needed one more piece to click. It clicked on the day before the wedding. Mr. Kapoor called my father in a rage. The tax department had raided his textile mills too. They'd found irregularities. They'd frozen some of his accounts. The officials had mentioned receiving a tip about illegal activities connected to an upcoming wedding arrangement. Mr. Kapoor blamed my father. My father swore he had nothing to do with it. They fought on the phone for 30 minutes before Mr. Kapoor said the words I'd been waiting for. The wedding is postponed. I can't proceed until this investigation is cleared. Too much scrutiny. My father tried to convince him otherwise. He offered to reduce his cut. He begged. He pleaded. But Mr. Kapoor had already hung up. My mother collapsed on the sofa. My father threw his phone across the room. Their perfect plan was crumbling, and they had no idea I was the one demolishing it. But I wasn't done. Not even close. That night, while my parents were drowning their sorrows in alcohol and recriminations, I uploaded everything. Every file, every recording, every piece of evidence I'd collected over the past 2 months. I sent it to the Income Tax Department, the police, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and for good measure, 3 investigative journalists who specialized in financial crimes. I included evidence of my father's illegal activities, my mother's complicity, and Mr. Kapoor's extensive fraud. I made sure to highlight how they'd planned to force me into marriage as part of a business deal. Then I packed a bag, took all my important documents, and quietly left the house at 2 a.m. Arjun was waiting for me at the train station. We'd planned this part carefully. We had train tickets to Bangalore. I had my job offer letter. He'd already secured a transfer to a college there. As the train pulled away from Delhi, I watched the city lights fade into darkness. Somewhere back there, my parents were sleeping, unaware that their world was about to collapse. The news broke the next morning, what should have been my wedding day. The headline screamed across newspapers and news channels, "Major tax evasion scandal uncovered. Industrialist arrested in corruption probe. Forced marriage plot revealed in financial fraud case." My phone rang constantly, but I'd blocked my parents' numbers. I did, however, accept a call from one of the journalists I'd sent the information to. She wanted my story, the personal angle, the daughter who was going to be sold to an old man to facilitate her parents' corruption. I gave her everything, not for fame or sympathy, but because I wanted the world to know exactly who my parents were. The article went viral within hours. Social media exploded with outrage. Women's rights organizations called for action. The pressure on the authorities intensified. My father was arrested 3 days later. The charges included tax evasion, bribery, forgery, and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming because I'd given them everything they needed. My mother wasn't arrested immediately, but she was called in for questioning. Her accounts were frozen. Their assets were seized pending investigation. Mr. Kapoor faced his own array of charges. His business empire began to crumble under scrutiny. Turns out, most of his wealth was built on illegal foundations. From Bangalore, I watched it all unfold with a sense of justice I'd never experienced before. But the story wasn't over yet. 2 weeks after the scandal broke, I received an unexpected package. It was addressed to me at the hostel where Arjun and I were staying. Inside was a letter from my mother's sister, my Aunt Priya. "Dear Mira, I'm so sorry for what my sister did to you. I had no idea it had gone this far. When I saw the news, I was horrified. I want you to know that not everyone in the family supported their actions. Some of us tried to talk sense into them, but they wouldn't listen. Enclosed is something I think you should have. It's a document your grandfather created before he died. He never trusted your father." The second envelope contained a will. My grandfather's will, dated 5 years before his death. In it, he'd left his entire estate, worth nearly 3 crores, not to my father, but to me and Arjun. The will had been hidden by my parents. They claimed my grandfather left everything to them, and we believed it because we were children when he died. But here was proof that my grandfather had seen exactly what kind of people they were. He tried to protect us even from beyond the grave. With this will, Arjun and I would have the money we needed to survive independently. More than that, we'd have the resources to ensure Arjun got the best medical care available. I contacted a lawyer immediately. The will was filed. Given that my parents were under investigation for fraud, the courts fast-tracked the probate process. Within 2 months, Arjun and I had access to our inheritance. The money our parents had stolen from us through lies and manipulation was finally ours. I used part of it to secure Arjun's medical treatment at the best hospital in Bangalore. No more worrying about costs. No more being held hostage by threats of withdrawn care. The rest I invested carefully. I also started working at the tech company, building my career on my own terms. 6 months after I'd left Delhi, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my mother, Mira. Her voice was small, broken. Nothing like the commanding tone I'd grown up with.
Please.
We've lost everything. Your father is in jail. I'm living in a one-room apartment. Can you help us? We're your parents. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the slaps, the threats, the way they tried to sell me, the years of lies and manipulation. You stopped being my parents the day you decided I was a commodity to trade. You made your choices. Now live with the consequences. But we're family. Family doesn't blackmail. Family doesn't beat. Family doesn't sell their daughter to the highest bidder. My voice was steady, without anger or emotion. Just fact. You taught me that everything has a price. Well, you've paid yours. I hung up and blocked the number. A year later, I was thriving. My career had taken off. Arjun was healthy and excelling in his studies. We'd built a life in Bangalore that was entirely our own. No lies, no manipulation, no toxic people. My father was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison. My mother managed to avoid jail time, but lost everything else. They'd become cautionary tales, the parents who tried to exploit their daughter and lost everything in the process. Mr. Kapoor's empire crumbled completely. He was convicted on multiple charges and lost his fortune to legal fees and penalties. The man who thought he could buy a young wife ended up alone and disgraced. The best revenge, I learned, wasn't violence or cruelty. It was using their own weapons against them, their greed, their lies, their assumption that I was powerless. They'd thought they could groom me for their purposes. Instead, I'd groomed myself for their destruction. One evening, as I sat in my apartment working on a new project, Arjun came home from college with a question. Didi, do you ever regret it? What you did to them?
I thought about it. Really thought about it.
No, I said finally. I regret that they forced me to do it. I regret that I had to become someone calculating and ruthless enough to destroy my own parents. But I don't regret saving us from them. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. They created their own enemy. They did. That night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I wasn't the same girl who'd been slapped and threatened a year ago. That girl had been naive enough to believe her parents loved her. Naive enough to think family meant something sacred. I was different now. Harder. More cautious. But also free. Free to make my own choices. Free to live my own life. Free from the weight of toxic people who called themselves family. The slaps had stung. The threats had terrified me. But they'd also awakened something I didn't know I had. The strength to fight back, the intelligence to win, and the courage to walk away from people who didn't deserve my love. My parents had tried to sell me. Instead, they'd forged me into someone they could never control. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Years later, I heard through distant relatives that my mother still occasionally asked about me. Still hoped I'd forgive them. Still believed that family obligation meant I owed them something. She was wrong. I owed them nothing. But they owed me everything, and they'd paid that debt in full. The price of gold, my father used to say, is determined by its purity. He never realized he'd taught me to value myself correctly. And once I knew my worth, I'd never again accept being sold for any price. And if this story gave you chills, don't just scroll away, hit that like button, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place. Would you have stayed and fought or walked away without looking back? Stories like this remind us that sometimes silence is louder than revenge, and walking away can be the most powerful move of all. If you love stories filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and shocking twists that make you question everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because the next story might just leave you speechless. And hey, if you think this one was intense, click the box on the left. Your next story is waiting, and this time, the twist will hit harder than ever. Remember, not every ending is sad. Some are just the beginning of something stronger, wiser, and more beautiful.